Let's go ahead and talk about adding and subtracting fractions. We're going to split this up into two different videos because it's one skill to be able to add and subtract fractions when they have the same denominator. It's a different skill to be able to add and subtract them when they don't. So we're going to start simple, adding and subtracting fractions with like denominators. So an example of a problem that you might get is, let's say 4/10 plus 3/10. When our fractions have the same denominator, it makes it really simple for us to add and subtract. The only thing that we have to add and subtract is our numerator. Our denominator is always going to stay exactly the same. So I'm going to start by adding 4 plus 3. 4 plus 3 is going to give me 7. And I'm keeping my denominator the exact same, 7/10. And there's my answer. If I were to take the same problem and subtract instead of add, again I have 4/10, this time minus 3/10, I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm just going to subtract between my numerators. So I have 4 minus 3, which is 1, and my denominator stays exactly the same. That's going to give me 1/10. Another example that you might have is something like 4/8 plus 2/8. Again, because my denominators are the same, the only thing I have to do is add up my numerators. 4 plus 2 is 6, and 8 is going to stay exactly the same. My denominator stays the same. So if you're doing this on a test, for example, you might have 6/8 as an answer option for this problem, but you might not have 6/8. And the only reason why you wouldn't have 6/8, because 6/8 of course is the correct answer, but it's not the answer in its simplest form. When we talked about finding equivalent fractions and simplifying fractions, the thing that we had to do when we simplified was to divide our numerator and denominator by the greatest common factor. Now, I know that the greatest common factor of 6 and 8 is going to be 2, and I can prove that to you by drawing out my F for factors and factoring both, but I promise you, I don't have enough room to do it, and I know that 2 is the greatest common factor. You can trust me on this one. So if I divide 6 by 2, I'm going to get 3, and if I divide 8 by 2, I'm going to get 4. So 3/4 is also an appropriate answer for this particular problem. It's an equivalent of 6/8, and it's also this answer, 6/8, in its simplest form. When we looked at these other two up top, 7/10 and 1/10 are both in their simplest forms. The reason I know this is because the greatest common factor of 7 and 10 is 1, and the greatest common factor of 1 and 10 is also 1. If 1 is my GCF, then that means that these are already in their simplest form.